How's it going, everyone? The PlayStation Store is currently running its games under $15 sale as well as its extended play sale, but as you can read by the title of this video, we're looking at games under the price of $5, so primarily we're focusing on the games under $15 sale. The extended play sale is all like complete editions, games of deluxe editions and things like that, so they're all above $5, but nonetheless, some great deals under $5 as well. So let's get right into it, and let's start off with a game that I am incredibly nostalgic with, and that is Bastion by Supergiant Games. This game came out like over a decade ago, but man, it still holds up tremendously well. Of course, this was Supergiant Games' breakout title, and it was one of those early like Xbox downloadable games that really showcased, wow, downloadable games can be like really great. And all these years have passed, and Bastion is still revered as one of those great games that has just aged incredibly well. The art style is fantastic, the narration in the game is great. It's not the lengthiest game in the world, of course, but you know, the experience that you're going to get is fantastic, and again, from a presentation standpoint, visually, soundtrack-wise, it's just so great. At $374, I think it's an excellent pickup, so go check that out. Speaking of Supergiant Games, gotta give a mention to Transistor. That's 75% off for $4.99. A little bit more expensive, but still a very good game in its own right. Now, I didn't like Transistor as much as I liked Bastion. Bastion is just one of those games that I think so highly of, but Transistor's a very good game in its own right. Another game with an incredibly slick presentation, and what's interesting about Supergiant is all their games have like awesome visual aesthetics, soundtracks, but they're all like pretty different from one another, and Transistor has this sci-fi themed world and is a pretty enjoyable game start to finish. I would highly recommend it if you want something a little bit. Would also highly recommend it, and at $5 it's a great price. Next up, a lot of you guys are probably familiar with Housemarque these days, given Returnal, but they've done a lot of other games. Super Stardust HD is probably one that a lot of you guys know, but Nex Machina is another great one that really does have Housemarque's blueprint on it as well, in the sense that it's got some fantastic particle effects. It's a chaotic game. It's got that bullet hell action-oriented gameplay. It's a twin-stick shooter, and it's very enjoyable. Obviously, you're not expecting something at the scale of a Returnal here, but it's a very enjoyable game as well. If you want something that's high-octane, frantic, action-heavy, Nex Machina is going to offer you that, and at $4.99, I think that's a pretty good pickup as well. Alright, next up, gotta give a recommendation to Play Dead's titles. Inside is $4.99. I believe Limbo is also on sale for $2.99, and there is a double pack that you can get for $6.99, so whatever you want to get, go for it. These games obviously have a very dark aesthetic, but also games that have aged pretty well just because it employs such an interesting visual style. Darker games, kind of more ambient, but very enjoyable in their own right. And from a narrative standpoint, both Inside and Limbo are pretty compelling games, and yeah, the games were received incredibly well as well. I think they are close to or at a 90 on Metacritic for reference, but $4.99 for Inside I think is quite good, and Inside doesn't get the love that Limbo got, but it's just at the level of Limbo in my opinion. And honestly, you can go back and forth on which one you like better, but both games are terrific. Alright, next up, another incredibly dark game. We've got Soma, which is 85% off for $4.49. This is done by Frictional Games, who also did the Amnesia titles, and I'll also throw in Amnesia Collection. That's 90% off for $2.99. Now, I think Soma is Frictional's best title. It is a very psychological horror game set in this underwater research facility. Super trippy game, like, not for the faint of heart. Know that you're going into a horror game and expect something a little bit mind-bending and a little bit trippy as well. You know, I think it really invokes that element of horror that Frictional honestly does a pretty good job doing in all of their games, but Soma really exemplified that. Super interesting game, and again, not for the faint of heart. Don't expect something relaxed here. Expect something that's going to stick with you for a little bit, and I played it right when it came out back in 2015, paid the full $30 for it, I believe it was, and I loved the game back then, and even now, if you want a quality horror game to go into, more of a psychological horror game, I think Soma is going to be something you really enjoy. Amnesia, on the other hand, Amnesia Dark Descent is one of the most iconic horror games of all time. Machine for Pigs, not as good as Dark Descent by any stretch of the imagination, but both games for $3 I think is a pretty good deal, so I thought I would give that a mention as well. Alright, next up, another throwback, a pretty iconic game in Psychonauts, done by Double Fine. Of course, we recently had the release of Psychonauts 2, but if you want a comedic platformer here, Psychonauts is a great one. Now, obviously, the game shows its age, but it's one that you can also go back to, and yes, while visually it's not blow away by 2022 standards, and there are definitely some elements that don't hold up as strongly. There's a reason why people for nearly 20 years were clamoring for a Psychonauts 2, and good on you guys, you finally got it, and Psychonauts 2 is an excellent game as well. But Psychonauts 1, if you want something on the cheaper side, this is only $4, and it's still a quality platformer for you to get into. It's a game that, you know, is really accessible to just about anyone. It's got comedy, but it's also got a relatively engaging narrative on top of that, and for $4, I think this is a great pickup. One that, if you played Psychonauts 2 and you enjoyed it, go back and check out Psychonauts 1 as well. And if you've never played Psychonauts, yeah, $4 for Psychonauts 1, I think, is a pretty solid deal. Alright, next up, we got Super Meat Boy, 80% off for $2.99, another super iconic game. This one, from a visual standpoint, I think has aged pretty well. I like the look of the game still to this day. I remember when I first picked up Super Meat Boy, it's a game that, you know, had me feeling some type of way as far as not wanting to break my controller. A game that I found very, very difficult. Obviously, it's one of those, like, precision platformer. You have to be very on the money or else it's going to be game over for you, but a very enjoyable game. Obviously, got a follow-up as well in Super Meat Boy Forever. That game is on sale, but it's like $11, so if you never played Super Meat Boy, try out the first game for $3. I think it's a high-quality deal. And yes, it is like, what, 12 years old, 13 years old at this point, but man, if you just want a difficult platformer to play and something that is quite addicting as well, like, yes, I raged at Super Meat Boy back in the day, but I was playing it for hours on end back in the day as well, so $3 for it. I think that's a solid pickup. And then finally, I want to give a mention, these two games kind of go hand in hand. I mean, they even have a double pack available. Valiant Hearts: The Great War and Child of Light. Yes, they're two very distinct games, but I always throw these games in the same pool because Ubisoft did both of them, and it was at a time where they were two very interesting IPs that you wouldn't expect from Ubisoft. Valiant Hearts: The Great War is this very, very artistic, both games are super artistic, but Valiant Hearts has a great look to it. It's a war story that can get pretty emotional. Some gameplay aspects I wasn't crazy about, but it's got this comic book look that looks great. And if you want a historical game that actually has a pretty strong story attached to it as far as being emotionally gripping, I think you can get into this quite a bit. For $4.49, this is an excellent deal, and I would highly recommend it. Child of Light, another super stylish game. It's a coming-of-age fantasy RPG. Great soundtrack to it as well. You know, it's not the most difficult RPG by any stretch, but it's an enjoyable one, and mechanically it works well enough. The story's really good, and it's not a super lengthy game either, so when you say RPG, sometimes you think like super, super lengthy game. It's not that at all, but it's still a very enjoyable game, and if you want something with a little bit of charm to it, if you want something that's a little bit more laid back, I think Child of Light will be right up your alley. I mean, a lot of you guys played Elden Ring. If you want something that's a nice contrast to that, Child of Light, I think, fits the bill pretty nicely. But Valiant Hearts: Great War, that's a great game as well. Wish Ubisoft would do more with both of those, but, you know, whatever. I'm sure these games didn't do blow away from a commercial standpoint, but both are very high quality and would strongly recommend it. But that is going to do it for me. Again, as far as games under $5, kind of sparse in terms of offerings on, like, big budget games. You don't have, like, the Deus Exes, the Just Cause 3s, the Sleeping Dogs that, you know, are those bigger games that are typically under $5, but some pretty solid low-key titles that, you know, I would still recommend. And obviously, games like Bastion, games like Transistor, Inside, Soma, those are high quality games, so I would strongly recommend them. But that's gonna do it for me. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.